Okay, we got to talk Ted Lasso. I don't think we have yet on the podcast.
I don't think so.
Are you a Ted Lasso watcher?
Oh my gosh.
Are you, Joe?
Which, by the way,
big Led Tasso guy.
Just watched the last season yesterday.
Same
so fresh.
here.
What? So we were like late too.
We were a little late. Well, we just we went through it too slow. We're always like, it gets to the evening, kids to bed. We're like, do you have it in Ted? Do you? It feels like an investment. You got to be like,
you want to enjoy it. I want to.
Yeah,
I don't want to
and
have
it's emotional. It's like, you got to actually have the energy for watching.
I would say I feel that you like want to enjoy it more than any other.
Yes,
True.
I agree.
Okay, so here's what I wanted to call out though, since, we are coaches and all. Did you guys take note of how they really, I think there were a lot of like cultural moment type of things they wove into the storylines, but maybe one of the biggest ones was like demystifying therapy and mental health. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was interesting because like mental health obviously is a big topic, but they really focused on demystifying therapy. They showed us like a therapist.
Yeah.
They showed us the insides of a meeting, of a therapy session. They talked about it a lot. And then the part that I loved, I wanted to bring up was, I think it's the second to last episode. There's this scene where Ted's mom is there and he gets really pissed at her.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the coolest, weirdest scene. It's like
I know.
This is why the show is genius. They show this moment where he's like really mad and he's like dropping F-bombs at her. You remember this?
Yeah. Oh,
and he's like really mad because he's like, Mom, how come you didn't work on yourself? He was mad that she hadn't, because right before that, they had shown a scene where like he suggested therapy because it's been a very core thing for him and his whole team.
Yep.
Which is, ironic because it's athletes to begin with. And then it's like, then he suggests it to her and she like shuts it down immediately.
Yeah.
Because, typically her generation is more like, there's a, what do you call it? It's like a
Stigma.
Thank you. There's like a stigma around therapy. Whereas to the younger generations, it's like, no, that's just part of our daily life. Like there's no stigma. It's actually like a good thing. We talk about it all the time. So I just found that so interesting and like cool. I was actually I wanted to like stand up and clap. I was like, yeah, I love they did that scene because it did some demystifying, but I think it showed more of the real, like how we all feel about it.
And I really also just loved how she didn't get mad, by the way.
That was really fascinating.
It was like, she was like, anyway,
it was such a
like
mother
this is not actually about the anger that I'm seeing. It's actually something much, much more.
Do you agree? Like I might be wrong, but I felt in the moment like in only a way that a mother could.
Yeah, right.
Anyone else would like fight back.
What? Yeah.
But there's such a deep love and understanding and like almost appreciating that he's like saying this thing he's felt.
I loved it.
The whole scene was like, I just couldn't stop thinking about it.
We could do a Ted Lasso like episode here because I could also talk about, I just want to say one thing. I love the way that Ted Lasso made everybody a better person. In general, everyone on that who he interacted with in 3 years was a better person because they interacted with him. And I thought to myself, I so want to be more of that where people are interactive. They don't walk away thinking she's great. I want them to think they're great. So much more. And I'm not great at that. I need to be better at that.
I'm with you. That is really cool. Well, transitioning from that.
What's yours?
Let's talk about calendar blocks. All right. So shout out to Katarina, who was working on calendar blocks. And I think this topic comes up for so many different reasons, but the common thread is like everyone's just so overly busy. And what frustrates me, maybe because I have put a lot of years of work into this and overcome a lot of it. So I'm not judging, but it's like, it frustrates me when people are still stuck in it. Cause I'm like, oh, you can get there. Come on. And the common problem is you're actually running so fast that you don't even have time to work on your calendar. So what was happening to Katarina was like, okay, she realized now what she needs to do, created the blocks, set up the system. Everything looks great. And then a month later, it's like, so how's it going? Hasn't even done any of it because she's been running so fast that she hasn't even had time to implement the thing. And then you add the layer of she has an admin and like didn't even have time to talk with the admin about it. So things were actually the whole process was actually causing more problems because the admin was like doing some things wrong because they didn't ever even talk about how it should work. And so I guess the shout out is just like, she kind of owned up to that, realized, yeah, I gotta actually take a step back and create time for this.
Yeah.
And the mindset shift, you know how it always comes back to the mindset or the belief. It was like believing that it's actually worth the time.
Absolutely.
Because the belief going on in the background for her is, no, I gotta constantly churn and respond to emails or else.
Right.
So that was the shift.
Yeah.
Another shout out, this is someone I was working with around life vision, was we were going through the different categories. There's kind of 7 different life categories. And he had this like really exciting vision stuff for each category. And it was really energizing him. He leads a whole company. So it's like, this stuff is really important right now. And then we got to the relationships and specifically marriage category. And he's like, I got nothing. He was just stumped. And he said it to me. He's like, I just don't even know what to put here. Like, I think we've been together so long. We're just kind of like humming along. We have a good relationship. Things are fine, but I don't know what to put here. Huh. And so I was like, would you like some suggestions? Well, based on everything I had heard from him, I was like, what if, the time frame was 10 years out? What if 10 years from now we got together and you were telling me like, our marriage feels like we're dating again. Like it's so exciting. I actually get butterflies like before going out on a date with her. And we like flirt, there's like these things that, and it's so funny because I was like saying it out loud, also getting excited. Like, man, I want that for myself too. And we were like starting to get giddy about it. And he was starting to get excited about it. And so he was like, yes, that's the thing. And it turned into this really fun conversation. Awesome. I just love, me and the life vision. That's just one of my favorites.
I love that you got him to find something.
Oh, because everyone goes into like, what is the point of this dumb exercise? And then they come out with like all this energy and clarity.
Do you have a personality gripe today?
I do. When you're like getting your hair cut or you're at the dentist and the person is, not everyone does this, but maybe the more extroverted ones, they want to chat. Yeah. And you and I know how it is. They actually, what's happening is they feel the need to chat because they think that you want that.
Absolutely.
But you're in a mood where you're like, I don't want to chat.
I'm good with nothing.
I'm gonna freaking sit here and do nothing. And this is my break.
Yeah.
And I never knew how to deal with that. I would always just like do what they wanted. And then Ashley and I were talking about it. This is a few years ago. We're like, no. Wait a minute.
Like we are actually
we're the paying customer.
Yeah, right.
And it's been this whole funny thing for us of trying to shift it. And I had one the other day where the dental hygienist was just like on and on and on. And then of course also asking me questions while there's stuff in my mouth.
And then it's like, what are we supposed to do here?
And it was 2 times in a row, that and a haircut where both of them, I was like, I just said it. I was just like, actually, I just kind of want to sit here and not talk.
Yeah.
And it felt so good.
Yeah.
But it's probably helpful for them too to know what I.
Yeah.
Do you do that?
Yeah. Two practices that I've just seen that I just love. I love it when they make it easy for us. One is my hair guy has a little sign in front of him that has a little flip with your mood.
Oh, that's genius.
You can flip it and say, want to talk.
You don't even have to say anything.
You just flip or you say, quiet's okay. It's like a little, and you can flip. Isn't that great?
Genius.
I love that. And then for massages, maybe this one's more common, but you feel it, you click before you go in, want a little conversation or total silence. Yeah. And it feels like whenever I've done that, they totally respect whatever it is.
So we should do that for coaching session.
Yeah.
Want to talk or total silence?
Right. No, I'm thinking that maybe the dentists need to catch on here, right?
Yeah. On the episode today, we have a guest interview that's going to be really fun, Angie Trueblood. And she is the founder and the leader of Podwize, which is a company that basically helps people promote their podcasts and more broadly helps them to understand how to pitch themselves and communicate what they do. So I think there's a lot of good like insights just from that part of her story, but she shares a little bit about her path from, all kinds of very different jobs in the past to now being a business owner, and also some of the real struggles, like the actual struggles of running a business. And we get to kind of hear from her. She's very real and shares, I think, in a very honest way. So I'm excited for that interview. I'm sitting here with Angie Trueblood, who is a good friend. We were formerly neighbors at work, and we've stayed connected. Angie, you are the founder of the Podwize Group, which is a company that helps people promote their podcast and learn how to talk about what they do, learn how to interview on podcasts and all kinds of cool stuff. But maybe explain in your own words what you do today.
Yeah, it's interesting because we work with a lot of people who don't have podcasts. So it's more of a podcast marketing company to where we work with people to use podcast as their outreach strategy. So they guest on other people's shows to allow them to get in front of new audiences. It's very relational based. It's very specific to the clients that we work with.
Yeah.
It's like a professional matchmaker,
Ooh.
kind of.
We are one of your customers. That happened after we met and we're neighbors. But I think that is something that has stood out to me is, it is a world where there's a lot of people always like hitting me up on LinkedIn to help with this type of stuff. And they always feel either fake or forced or contrived. And the way you and your company do it is, you're right, it is actually really authentic, but it's also really comfortable and good. Like it actually feels real. And you've helped us to start connecting with other podcasts. So, okay, tell me though, before we get into it, what was your first job?
I have been working my entire life, and I probably started this job before I was 16 because I think I remember my mom dropping me off. She got me a job at an eye doctor's, like a solo eye doctor's office. And I would go in after hours and I would call his book of business to get them to schedule their appointments.
That's amazing.
And I'm like, how did I actually do that as a 15, 16-year-old?
I did. That is hilarious just now because it's all through text and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you know?
It was like a paper.
Did you know before day one that that's what the job was going to be? Or did you kind of find out?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well,
so I was the only one in the office. It was basically at night. It wasn't in the best part of town. I look back at it now and I'm like, how did we think this was safe or a great idea? But it worked. It was my first sales job, I guess.
It is kind of sales. It's probably a safer place to learn because, you're not having to actually sell, but you're doing the same types of skills.
Yeah. And they were cold calls, but they had been patients before. So it's not like I was dialing random people, seeing if they needed a checkup.
Were there skills from that you think today, like, oh, that's where I learned that?
I mean, I don't know if it's a skill or just, I guess, a talent or a comfort with talking to people, because really, when you're that young, you often don't have experience having those types of relationships with adults. And even sitting in a little bit more, it's not like I was in a power position with them, but I was guiding the conversation and I was guiding the scheduling. So I think it helped build my confidence at a young age, and reinforce that sales is really about communication and finding a good fit for everyone, not like hard-nosing people into saying yes.
That's actually interesting, because one thing you've helped me with is, to your point, like not selling, but when I'm, I don't know, at a neighborhood gathering and people are like, oh, what do you do? That question has always stumped me. I've always struggled with how to answer it, like in the party setting. And I think you're one of the people who have helped me the most at knowing how to answer that, which is, it's a form of selling, but it's just communicating what I do in a way that's interesting to them.
Yeah. And I think it's like lowering the bar that we place on ourselves when we are telling people what we do. It's so ingrained that every opportunity is a selling opportunity, but sometimes it's just a conversation and that person might know someone. So if we can lead with clarity, it's hard though, because some of the work both of us do, not everyone would fully understand it. So we have to make sure we kind of level set it with people depending on how they know us and where they are.
Yeah. Okay, so fast forward to what you do now. There is a tie-in to that first job, but was it a straighter line towards what you do now? Were there different dodges left and right? Because I think I know a little bit about, like, weren't you a biology teacher at some point? And
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. How much time do we have? So yeah, like my background in terms of schooling is deep in the biological sciences. So my undergrad was in biology and secondary education. My master's was in biology. I studied the ecological genetics of striped bass.
Yes.
I did 2 years of a PhD program at University of Miami studying beach mice. Then
Beach
I taught
mice.
for a little.
Oh my gosh.
They're an endangered species,
I
Steve.
didn't even know that was a thing. Okay.
Yeah. And then I came back home and taught high school for a couple of years. Loved it. But I just saw the potential. I guess I was 25, 26 then.
Mm-hmm.
And like I had friends who were in the business world and they were buying houses, nothing elaborate, but in our late 20s, that's kind of like the next step. I was single, all my friends were, and I could not imagine on a teacher salary, like how old I would need to be able to afford buying a townhome for me to live in.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I went into pharmaceutical sales and I did that for 10 years. Yeah.
I didn't know that either. Yeah.
You didn't?
No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I was the drug rep that you see in doctors' offices for a big company. And I've went around to I dabbled in different therapeutic areas, which it kept me fresh and interested. And it was really a good fit from like the sales side of my life and the science side. But I got bored because so much of the day was just driving and not really having that human interaction. Then when my kids were really little, like 2 and 4, I quit to come home and spend more time with them. And that's when I started not the business as it is today, but sort of like the precursors to it, which I can get into if you want.
Yeah, I know, because people always ask, you and I have done it, so we don't think it's all that interesting to like start a business from scratch when you had a job. But
yeah.
You know how it is when people who haven't done that, they're so interested to hear like, but what was the moment you knew you wanted to do that? And how did you make that shift? Like, isn't it scary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I had always had this like entrepreneurial spirit. Like I remember talking to my girlfriends and they would always laugh at the different ideas, not at the ideas, but at the fact that I came up with so many ideas. I actually have a file folder of business ideas.
Yes. Well, that was our when we first met, it was a explosion of ideas meeting. And then at the end, I was picturing like some other person sitting there being like, what the hell just happened?
I love it that we do have niceties. We're like, hi, how's the family? Okay, let's get down to business.
Anyway, ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. But and I think this is specific to women sometimes leaving the traditional workforce and even just where we are in our lives in terms of economically, like my husband and I were not in a position where I could just give up that type of career and not make any money to come home. So I actually started in direct sales, which love it or hate it. For me, it was a really great Band-Aid and a bridge to entrepreneurship because I could sell someone else's product. Like I could tackle the marketing, I could tackle the selling and the customer support without having to do all of the back end stuff from scratch. And then it allowed me to even get more into that entrepreneurial space and recognize opportunities.
Okay, but for you, can you pinpoint the driver? Like, I think there's a lot of different types of motivations for starting your own thing, being entrepreneurial. Do you know what was the biggest one for you?
Yeah, I was super bored. I get bored really, really easily. And that's one thing as an entrepreneur, like I've had to start recognizing when I'm flexing because I'm bored, and when there's actually a reason that I should be flexing. So for me, in the pharmaceutical world, I had actually negotiated to go down to 4 days a week. And my boss was like, yeah, I'll take you as many days as you will give us. And then once I had Henry, I tried to negotiate down to 3 days a week. My immediate boss was super fun, like cool with that. She's like, again, I will take you however you can show up for us. But higher management wouldn't let me. And so I look back on it and we're still really good friends to this day. And she's like, I think we did you a service in not going to 3 days because at some point you would have still wanted to go.
Yeah.
So I really think it was just, I needed more flexibility in terms of, ideas that I could actually implement.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, and to me, it's impressive that someone like you who has lots of ideas has focused on something like very niche. I don't know if you might not feel that, but I look at it and I go, ooh, what's so nice about your business is it's a very specific thing. And, I'll like send people your way sometimes, and it's so easy to say, this is what it is. And, this is why you probably need their help. Yeah. But maybe just explain to people a bit about like, what is it that you're doing now? I don't know, kind of day in the life, and where are you headed next with it all? Yeah. Even if there's stuff outside of your core business that you're thinking about.
Yeah, so we've definitely evolved. I mean, I started basically as a freelancer, and then just when I got busy, I would add more people on. We've dabbled in having a course and a membership, which is where our first connection exploded.
Yeah.
But I've shut that down. Like back in January of 2023, I just recognized the size of business that we are and the level of support that I have on my team. It doesn't warrant me having two very different business models, which is what the client work side, where we actually work one-on-one with clients to get them placed on podcasts or to develop their strategy. Like that's one part of our business. And then the other part of it was a course/membership that taught people how to pitch themselves. And I was the only one really doing anything on that end of the business. And even though it was profitable, which I know a lot of people are like, oh, I would love to have a membership that brought in a couple $1,000s extra a month, it was pulling me in too many different directions. And so this year we've really focused in the client side, which was really scary in the beginning of the year because we took a dip in revenue, and it really messed with my mind, if I'm being candid, in a way that I have never experienced as a business owner. But now we've really like popped back, and our revenue is higher than even when we had the membership. It just, man, that was a rough go of it as a business owner.
Yeah. Oh, I feel for you. That is tricky.
Yeah.
And it's hard to.
That's where we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you have thoughts about where you're headed next?
Yeah, it's really building out the team and getting me in a position of more of focused solely on business development and team development. So the business model will likely stay the same. We've toyed with the idea of adding podcast production in-house, but so what we do, and you know a bit about it, it is very project management heavy. There are lots of moving pieces to pitching people and getting them scheduled and all of that. Mm-hmm. And the idea of bringing on podcast management and podcast production, which is equally project management heavy, it just now is definitely not the time. So we've actually been partnering with some production companies, and we're working right now in a white label capacity with a pretty big company pitching their clients, but they just wrap it into the contract.
Oh, cool.
Which, yeah, it's really interesting. So we're testing that out too. So it's just shoring up the team and then figuring out, are there other ways for us to grow our network and our book of business that don't necessarily involve expanding to a giant team or a multi-layered team, I think is really what it is.
That's cool. It's fun to watch it. You're like doing so awesome with those different like pivots and growth. Cause we did kind of meet in the middle of COVID small business life where everything was dire. Do you ever miss the biology stuff at all?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a science geek. I'm kind of a math geek. I get it through my kids now. Like I did homeschool 1 year of COVID. And I remember when my daughter went into math, she was like, this is so easy. This is all the stuff you taught me last year. And I'm like, I know, because I love math. So I miss it, but I don't think it's something, I'll ever pivot back to.
Yeah. There's like ways that I think that's why we geeked out on membership. We both had that science brain that's like it's fun to build the business and tinker with it.
Yeah.
And some people find that part like frustrating, just annoying or tiring.
They're like, I could build 5 of them.
Yeah. Well, I'm a fan of your podcast. So also just like say a little about that because people might want to check it out. Here's my plug. at first I thought, oh yeah, it's about, people who have podcasts learning how to pitch better. No, it's actually for anybody. I've actually sent it to some people that are just trying to figure out like how to introduce themselves, like my example, or how to kind of, present ideas in their job. But what would you say about it? And say the name of it.
Yeah. So the name of it is Go Pitch Yourself. We've been in production over 3 years, over 100 episodes. And it initially started in a way where we were teaching people how to pitch themselves to be guests on podcasts. It was really a lead-in to the membership community, but it has since evolved. We do have podcasters on and we talk about podcasts, but we've also had some series, like I had Shannon Siriano Greenwood on to talk about pitching sponsors for live events. So that is sort of the next thing on my list, is to figure out the pivot of the show, because since we've shut down the membership, I want to make sure the content of the podcast guides people into working with us. Not always, but that it really complements that we're client-based. So I need to figure it out. But yeah, we had an interview a couple of months ago. I don't know if you heard it. There's some podcasts that charge to have a guest come on, and not a lot of people are talking about it other than complaining about it, which I have been guilty of. But I have a friend who paid $2,500 to be on John Lee Dumas's show. I was like, will you come on and let me ask you all the questions? And he was like, yes.
Yeah.
So it's a really fun space. So definitely, listener, even if you're not in podcasting, I think it could be really eye-opening.
Or because we have a lot of people who listen who are maybe dabbling with an idea on the side, trying to start something on the side, thinking about doing their own thing. And they're kind of in between those worlds. They're not just working at a company or just an entrepreneur. And I think I've noticed on your podcast, you also talk with people and interview people who, yourself and them, have a lot of that mix going on, trying to balance the different things or learning how to start your company while you also have other things going on. So I think that's even, I've had takeaways in that space from listening to your interviews. But
it's definitely like we want to wrap in the whole person. I've shared before at different stages along the journey, I've applied to jobs in like moments of weakness. And I don't think there's a lot of people out there talking about that. But if you haven't thought about going and getting a regular job as a business owner, I would love to speak to that person, even if it's in like the quiet of the night when you're like, would it be easier?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So Angie, I want to dive into that moment of when you're running a business, but you're thinking, should I just look for a job?
Yeah.
And I know we've both had multiple of them, but is there one in particular that feels like the critical moment for you?
I think my most recent has been the most grounding, and the one to where I don't think I'm going to have that experience moving forward. It's literally been over the last 6 months, like earlier in 2023. I know myself from being well networked in the agency and the client space. A lot of companies saw a dip in clients at the end of 2022. Like typically January is our busiest client month, and it was not this year, which made me really nervous, especially as we were shutting down an entire arm of our business. And I remember looking at my husband, one, looking at what I pay myself, and then two, saying, jobs have changed since I left the workforce. Yeah. I came home in 2014. And so remote work, while online businesses were doing it, regular employers were not. And I said, I could be earning a lot more money than I am earning now at a regular job, and I could probably still be remote. And so I explored that. I also explored selling the company to see if there was a buyer, thinking, okay, I could sell it and then go get a job. And there were all of these like stop points that I think was God looking out for me. Like, I am not quite done yet, because I had a job that I had thought would be a dream job. I actually got into the interview process. And as I learned more of it, I'm like, I think that would be a job that I am interested in. And I don't think I would be paid what I am worth. And it ended up not working out, which was great. And so I actually had an experience earlier this year too, where I hurt my back, just old age, like nothing monumental.
Yeah.
Oh, my back is really hurt for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, because I slept wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a story. And my team was able to deliver for the clients. I mean, you were one of our clients then, and I don't think you even knew that I was kind of out for a bit because the team was running so seamlessly. We ended up booking like 3 new clients when I was only plugged in a little bit. And it just reinforced in me, like, you've got this, like you can build this to whatever it is that you want to build it to. And I don't think I'm going to flex in that direction moving forward because I've let myself kind of go there mentally to see what it might look like. And it's not my time.
Yeah, I know. I've had similar times where it also driven by the money challenge and the money question. Like, ooh, well, I can make this based on my schedule. I could just work a part-time job and then just have a steady income stream. But I've also had the follow-up thought that's similar, which is, but then that divides your attention. And in some ways it diminishes your commitment to what you're building.
For sure.
And it is, but it's a weird thing to wrestle with because when you have a job, the world's different now. So people do have like a portfolio of jobs sometimes, but at least for me, and it sounds like for you, when I was in different jobs, that wasn't even an option on the table. So.
No. And I think for me, as I evaluated it, I looked at what it's actually forced me to get more intentional with our own business finances. You and I both sometimes live in the online business space where you hear about making investments in coaches, which I think is really worthwhile. The vast majority of the time when you do your due diligence, there's courses out there which can really be worthwhile when you do your due diligence. But I think I wasn't prioritizing building up like a savings for the business.
Yeah.
And I've since started doing that, and I've given myself a raise, and I've really looked at the finances in a way that I never had before, looking for sustainability long-term. And I think that's because that switch like finally flipped of, you got this.
Yeah.
You just got to do the work.
Yeah. That's really cool. I've also noticed in a similar way, one of the fun things can also be hard and scary, but one of the fun things about owning and building a business is you can do anything with the financial picture. Like there are different ways to approach it. There are different things to do with the money. There's different ways to slice and dice it. And there's not just one answer. I didn't know that at first. I wasn't even thinking about that question until I started realizing like, oh, there's different ways to slice this. And it almost, it actually made it a little more hopeful because you can be intentional to make it a certain way. It's not just about like, well, here are the dollars I have and what do I do with it? Is it working or not? Yes or no? It's not actually that finite as a yes or no.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What was that like to navigate the idea of, and then doing the giving yourself a raise part of it?
I mean, that part was great. I always tell my husband, I'm like, I have the best boss. She really sees the value in what I bring to the table, and she is paying me for it. I mean, there have been times, so we have 2 other employees on the team and then some contractors. And one thing that I did when I hired back in the fall was I made sure that who we brought on had the capacity to work like 25 hours a week at least, which was sort of like the biggest chunk of time anyone would ever be working for us. And what I am seeing now is that I really like having someone that is super committed to us. And so my goal is to not grow the team like width wise, but to grow them depth wise to where they are giving more to us and I can give more back to them. And even as we were looking and booking more clients over the summer, I'm having to check in with them to say like, how are you feeling? Are you overwhelmed? Because we are taking on more clients than we have before. So it's really, for me, it's juggling the workload. But I think knowing that I'm fully committed, I've said yes to clients that previously I probably would not have stacked on top of each other because I know we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. So,
and what are you doing?
That's stressful, but in a good way.
It's stressful in a good way. And I guess I'm curious, what are you doing to prevent, like you said, that low point of maybe I should just get a job? You're not going to go back to that. Like, what are you doing different to hedge against that, or to kind of make sure?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking of similar things with Greenhouse, where I learned a lot of good lessons from the pandemic, especially financially.
A lot of opportunity.
And it was like, okay, there are some approaches I'm taking, so that is not going to happen again. The savings buffer is one of them. Like, the only reason we even survived was I had built at least a decent one, because I had learned that from somebody. But now going forward, I'm building a much bigger one. So it's not that I can control the ups and downs of business. There's always going to be ups and downs, but I am not going to, like, it's either going to kill the business or not.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be the situation I experienced before, where things just get suddenly real tight. That's my example, but I'm curious for you what you're doing differently.
I mean, there's not a lot of doing differently. For me, it's creating that financial stability that I don't feel like I had before. And that is pulling back on, I mean, as an idea person, I'm also a quick start. So even you and I were connecting about me renting an office space literally 24 hours ago.
Yeah.
In between then and now, I'm like, no, that's not a good use of our funds right now. Like, I want to build up this bank of money even more before I start making investments. So I think it's not just building up the savings, but questioning myself and forcing myself to take time before I invest, so that I don't then regret it.
Yeah. That's really cool. I mean, I feel like there's so much more I want to dive into, but it's really helpful to hear a bit of your story and see how those past experiences that at the time maybe you had no idea you're coming to where you are now, and they are different, but you're pulling from that in the kind of problem solving, in the, hey, let's engineer this thing to work better and keep improving it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say one more thing aside from just the financial piece of how we're running the money. I think I am learning to pivot in a way that doesn't create a totally new product that I need different people to deliver on. So I had mentioned before that we're white labeling with a podcast production company. And that is such a beautiful use of our time, because it cuts down. We don't need to work. We don't have to have meetings with clients, which is where I typically get drawn in. And that's a really big position to hire for and train for. I'm also looking at ways to where we can serve our clients with strategy without me needing to be on 5 calls a month.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at ways that we can deliver without having to have so many different types of team members.
Is that like adjusting the way that you approach kind of your calendar and the structure of your time at all?
I need to, yes. I think part of it is I've always been the one that's been on the every other month strategy calls with clients. And what I do is I actually give a lot of business strategy. It's not all podcast guesting. And so then when you're looking to hire, you're like, wait, I need someone who can pitch and then who can also give business strategy.
Yeah.
And that's just a hard ball of wax to hire for.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, why don't I take one of my ideas and do like a monthly or every other month meeting with all of our clients and create a strategy call where we can all interact. And then I don't need to be on a monthly or every other month call with them.
Brilliant.
Then the account managers can just do the podcast stuff.
I love it too, because this is a space you and I both live in. Why it's fun to talk to you is the intersection of client type of business and online. And I think there's more and more of that. That's a growing space, and people aren't talking about it enough because it's really tricky to manage the balance. But I think it's so worth it. And it's that to me sounds like an idea that helps to fuse them well. It helps everybody involved. and things like you and I have both tried so many things in the membership space, and it's tricky. It's really hard when you also have a client-based business.
Yep, for sure.
Well, thanks for joining the podcast and just sharing real stuff. And I hope people check yours out, which is Go Pitch Yourself.
Yep. And the podwizegroup.com.
The podwizegroup.com. What's your socials though? What's like, where should they find you on social?
On LinkedIn, and I really am most active at Angie Trueblood on LinkedIn. So that's sort of my social home right now.
Well, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later. We need a whole other episode on that, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thanks for coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you.